Namaskar and welcome to this special program. My name is Vipul Mudgal and today we are talking about agricultural communication. My guest in the studio is Dr. Abdul Wahid Khan, an internationally recognized educator, communicator and development thinker in his own right. Dr. Khan has done many eclectic things in his life. He has been a Vice Chancellor of Indira Gandhi National Open University here in India. He's been in Paris with UNESCO as the Assistant Director General of ICT of UNESCO, and he's been practically all over the world working with farm communities, working with women, working with laborers, working with communicators and university folks. Sir, welcome to this program. My question to you, sir, is how do we understand agricultural communication? Why do we need agricultural communication today?
Well, the agricultural communication, as the word clearly indicates, is the dissemination or sharing of information and knowledge in agriculture, innovations in agriculture with the end users, that is farmers. So essentially it's an art, it's a practice, it's a process of communicating a new agriculture information to the farmers. Essentially that is what is referred to.
There is an agrarian crisis going on in the country. We are saying that agriculture is lagging behind, productivity is falling. Do you think communication can help us?
Well, I personally believe that communication is an essential component for enhancing productivity. I mean, that would be applicable to any set of audiences, and certainly farming audiences who have been practicing traditional agriculture. There is no question that the scientific agriculture, the practice of scientific agriculture can result in better yields, higher productivity, higher remuneration of the produce that the farmers produce and so on. So it is, in my view, it is important, but like any other art, like any other process, it's a question of how effectively you do it.
So is it like communication is a link between laboratory and field? Is it a link between people and farmer? I mean, how does it work?
Well, I mean, if you look at the genesis of India's agricultural development, you may be familiar with the word agricultural extension. Now, agricultural extension assumes that there is a center somewhere and then there is a periphery, and the information has to flow from the center to the periphery. Now, that was also referred to as hypodermic needle method of giving information, that one-way flow of information. Now, we know better in the field of communication that it is more effective if there is a degree of interactivity, if there is a sharing of knowledge and information rather than one-way flow of information. So, if you look at the root of agriculture communication, it comes from the field of agricultural extension, except that in agricultural extension it was through interpersonal communication, agricultural agents. After the initiation of community development blocks, large number of agricultural extension workers were appointed for them to take information and knowledge in new agriculture to the farmers. Now, but when you look at the number of farm families, number of farmers who are practicing agriculture and the number of agriculture extension, there is a huge gap between their capacity to disseminate information and the number of people that they need to reach. So that's where the idea came that we have to adopt other means of communication, more effective means of, or at least a system that would allow dissemination or sharing of knowledge, but it remains dissemination, and the word dissemination implies that the information flows one way, and that remains still to a large extent really a problem in communication in the area of agriculture communication.
No, this works very well. I mean, I've broadly understood what you're saying. Obviously, there is a lot that can be told. In various ways, the villager can take advantage of new technologies, new findings in the laboratories, the knowledge, sharing of information, etc., etc. But sir, you said that it has to be a two-way communication. And what does a farmer bring to the table? In what way can we learn from his experiences or his common knowledge or his local understanding?
Well, let's say, for example, if you are broadcasting a radio program, a farm radio program, you are essentially communicating from wherever an expert is available, his or her expertise in a particular branch of agriculture to the farmers, to the farm women, etc. But when you take the microphone to the farmer and record their experiences of how they practice, what obstacles they face, what works and what doesn't work, to that extent you bring certain degree of feedback and interactivity into the program. Unfortunately, most people practice one-way communication. Even with all the knowledge about the benefits of interactive communication, largely the communication designed for farming communities, for farmers, for farm audiences tends to be one-way communication. But for today, fortunately, we have all kinds of technologies available, lot more versatile than ever before, lot more cost-effective. Telephone, for example, receiving information feedback from farmers after you have shared some information, etc. Even to a certain extent, community multimedia centers. I think these are the technology today allows greater degree of interactivity, but it has, unless it is part of the design, deliberate attempt on part of
somehow, sir, it has had a very limited impact. But what you're saying, I understand completely. That obviously this has a great role. For instance, if the farmers have to be connected to the mandis, if they want to know, I'm taking my produce today, what is the rate today? Should I go in X direction or Y direction? Will I get a better rate there? So obviously we can get better information through his mobile phone about the mandis, about the prevailing rates. Second, we can get information about weather. Should I be watering today and sowing my field through tube well, or should I wait till day after tomorrow when it is expected to rain? So obviously we can get information about weather, about environment, about mandis, about whole lot of other things. Now, is it happening anywhere, or is it like a mixed bag, beginning to happen in some states, not happening?
It does happen to an extent. I mean, it is not practiced as widely as it should be. I mean, people talk about the use of ICT in agriculture, and of course, there is a tremendous scope of doing that. Let me give you an example of my days in All India Radio. We had a farm broadcasting program from Bangalore station. One day, the farm radio officer, he went to the village and he was talking to the vegetable growers, people who were bringing vegetables to Bangalore. Now, vegetable and fruits are perishable commodities. If they cannot reach the market on time, the price of the produce tends to decline. Sometimes the bus will go out of order when they were not able to reach. Sometimes that they will be held. When they went to the market, they were exploited by the brokers and so on and so forth. So they discussed the idea of why can't we organize the farmers, and on one hand, and the State Department of Horticulture together and develop a cooperative vegetable kiosk. Now, as a result of that, a large number of kiosks were developed, and it became a very, the consumers were getting vegetables and fruits at lower cost. The farmers were getting better remunerative prices. Now, it's
a win-win situation.
It was a win-win situation, and it was basic intervention came from radio. I mean, radio at that time, All India Radio was the only game in town. Now, of course, there are all kinds of other sources of information. But just to give you an example, that yes, the media and sources of information can make very positive contribution, provided that they are used effectively and designed with the farmers in mind.
Sir, there is a convergence of mediums on this platform called mobile phone. We can have television on mobile, we can also have radio on mobile. So I think what you're saying is making great sense for us, and I think we should not forget radio. Radio is a medium of agricultural communication. It is also can be a medium of extension. Now, my next question is, obviously logically, we started with agricultural communication, and Dr. Khan, you brought us to extension communication, and you said there has to be a two-way communication, there has to be a feedback, and we have to make use of all of it for the betterment of the farmer. Now, this obviously takes us to the third direction, which is called development communication. Now, development communication is obviously more than agricultural communication. It is about the overall development of an area, of a human being. Now, how do you see agricultural communication related to development communication?
The way I look at it is really that agricultural communication is a subset of development communication. Whereas agriculture communication deals primarily with sharing of information and knowledge in agriculture, development communication is more encompassing, whether it's health, population, education, family welfare, nutrition, people's participation, and so on and so forth. But I mean, the area of development communication has also evolved over a period of time. And international organizations such as UNESCO, UNDP, UNICEF, Food and Agriculture Organization, United Nations Environmental Program, all these organizations have a development communication program. The titles may vary, but basically the idea is that communication must be an integral part of any development scheme, because that development is about people. If people do not participate, if they don't have any say in the planning and decision making of the schemes and plans that affect their lives, to that extent they will not be very enthusiastic, they will not participate. Yes, the government machinery can go and show so many people showed up in this meeting, so many sanitation facilities were created. I mean, we all know that at one point the area under so-called compost pits was larger than the total area of a particular district.
which is all on paper.
On paper. I mean, this happens all the time. But the point is that, if you look at the genesis of development communication, it was actually, the view was that having communication facilities themselves create modernization, need achievement, motivation, aspirations, etc. So it develops an individual who wants to do more, who is aspiring to be more productive, etc., etc. That model was kind of, there was a question mark, that it is not as simple as just having any means of communication would produce development.
This is wonderful. So, Dr. Khan has brought us to another area, which is the area of democracy. Since you say that development communication is the bigger area, of which agricultural communication is a subset. Now, obviously, this brings us to the issue of some kind of participation, as you yourself said. Now, this participation also comes through other tools of democracy, like decentralization, like devolution of power, like sharing of planning by the panchayats. And obviously in India, we have a huge matrix of panchayati raj where people make their own plans, etc., etc. Now, tell us, in what way can this communication process strengthen democracy itself?
Well, I think, in my view, development is all about empowerment, especially the people who are most marginalized. Because when you look at poverty, poverty is not merely absence of material things in life. Poverty is also hopelessness, helplessness. Now, if you don't involve people in the decision making about their own lives, how do you expect them to take part, to become active, to be motivated, etc.?
Wonderful. What you're saying is also aspirations. People also need to grow in their aspirations.
Yeah. So, I mean, a participatory communication, I mean, the later thinking in development communication was that it's not just any communication, but communication that really empowers people, and communication that enables people to participate in the development process as a whole. That kind of communication is far more effective and long-lasting than just simply conveying a message, giving the information, etc., etc.
Thank you, Dr. Khan. This is very interesting. Now we are coming to another area, which is, since you talked about your village, which is in North India, which is a remote village in North India, where you see all the experiments which one talks about, it almost like your village is a crucible. You can see whether it is working or not working. Now, sir, there is another issue which is dogging rural India, and one of the most important issues of development in India, and that is migration. There is forced migration. Millions of people are forced to migrate to the slums to look for employment in urban India. Now, do you think agriculture communication in any way can help people to stay in their own village, or is there any way in which we can help this migration in a positive way, where you have more aspirational migration, more migration which happens because of the pull factor of good jobs rather than because of a push factor of hopelessness, as you described?
Well, I think it is a combination of both. It is a combination of both. It's also a pull factor, that people go where they think, according to their perceptions, the life is better. It's not fun not to have access to any health facilities. It's not great not to have electricity when it's dark. It's not fun when you don't have access to safe drinking water, etc., etc. So life is tough in the villages. There is no question about that. And so people are attracted, they leave. I mean, in my own village, almost 80% of the houses are locked now.
My God, that's a very depressing situation, sir.
The able-bodied men leave the village, and it's the female population that stays behind. I mean, and they have to, now, agriculture, there are some people who still practice agriculture, but majority of the people have given their land for sharecropping. Now, one has to design, if that is the situation, then that's the reality. You cannot ask all the people living in Bombay, Calcutta, Delhi and elsewhere to come back to the village. It's not going to happen. Just not possible.
But if there is more employment in the village, if there's more productivity in the farm, then probably...
Now, yes, that is what I am now coming to. That if you create growth centers, rural-based growth centers, in localities where people are, and if you give them better life, then, I mean, if you can't find a good school for your children, would you like to live there?
Definitely not. So there's another question that your discussion brings us to, as you say that 80% houses are locked, and the farming is either done by sharecroppers or in those families where men have migrated, farming is being done by the females, by women. Now, our communication technologies and our processes of communication are built in such a way that we are obviously all the time communicating with men folk.
Exactly.
So is there anything that can be done?
In fact, I'm glad you raised this question. When I was working for Food and Agriculture Organization in Nepal, and I used to say jokingly that when we train the men farmers, we are actually training the husbands of the farmers.
Right.
Because the majority of agricultural operations for example, in Nepal, are done by women. I mean, anywhere in India also, when you go to, let's say, the hill districts of Nainital and Ranikhet and Pithoragarh and so on and so forth, the able-bodied men go and work as security guards or whatever little menial jobs that they have, and leave the women folks behind. They have to survive. So therefore they are involved in virtually all agricultural operations except plowing and digging ditches and so on and so forth. So there is no reason why we should not train women. I mean, this is where, since we have a mindset that farmers means men, if that is not the reality, then should you not change your emphasis? Should you not change your training methodology? Should you not change your communication
The
pattern?
entire communication strategy needs to
Needs
change.
to-
As you said, that there are two things which are coming out from Dr. Abdul Wahid Khan's practical experience and also as an experience as an expert is one, the communication has to be two-way, communication has to be participatory, and communication has to be built for people you want to really address, like the female farmers, like the women who are actually the farmers in India, about 40, 50, what is the percentage, 60%, 50%?
Well, by definition, at least 50%.
Okay.
You know, you're talking of those after the migration.
After the
are
migration,
much larger.
much larger. So obviously, and this is a trend which is also increasing. Now, I want to come to the issue of, say, skill formation. Now, obviously, in the villages, if there is in some villages carpet weaving is a profession. Some villages are very good at carpentry. You know, and some villages are very good at crafts, all kinds of crafts. So, can there be some kind of a skill mission which can work with communication technologies and which can help them in development and development communication?
Well, again, it's a very good question. I will give you example of my personal experience of working with women's groups in Bangladesh. Now, in theory, you can bring women to learn about, give them some agriculture tips, give them some tips of maintaining, how to maintain family accounts, etc. In reality, the women coming from low-income families have no time really to go and just for learning purposes. But if you give them resources and skills for handicrafts, for goat raising, beef fattening, paddy husking, you know, these are economic activities around which you can attract them. They become members. Once they come there, then you can also incorporate education or any other form of communication.
I have another question for you, since once again connecting to your village, and that brings the beauty out, because we are not talking to somebody whose knowledge is mobilized only through books. Your knowledge also comes from your experience as being a farmer's son. Now, please tell us the state of education in those villages that you see. And once again, can communication technologies of today, like the satellite communication broadcasting, like the classrooms that can be connected to satellites, can there be something in which communication can play a pivotal or a central role?
Again, I'm very happy that you asked this question, because as I said, I just come back from the village. I spent a couple of days there, and I'm very deeply disturbed with the state of education in the villages today, largely because of corruption, because it's so well entrenched in the system that you try to find, as a result of this, now all kinds of teaching shops are springing up. People are opening private schools by teaching the students to say good morning and good evening, and parents think that they are learning well, and so on. Unfortunately, the quality of education, I can say with confidence, at least in my area, has declined, and corruption has destroyed the educational system. Children come, play the whole day, go back. Teachers are there on paper, they don't come, they don't teach. Now, at least if you bring through technology classrooms, let's say a television set in the classroom, and give the children some exposure to the subject matter, provided that programming is done well and in a creative manner. Because simply by having talking heads in the classrooms, I don't think children
it's not going to help.
Children are not going
But technology has a role here.
Absolutely. I think, frankly, now it is clearly demonstrated that technology, especially the gaming method of teaching children, etc., can be very creative.
This is very interesting. So what you're saying is that it's not just the scientific part of technology, but is also the software part of technology, how to make it interesting, how to make it connected.
It is more the software. It is, the tool is just a tool. I've always, and I'm not from the hardware part of technology or communication. Often I find it difficult to explain to people that in fact, as far as hardware is concerned, I'm technology illiterate. But my interest in technology is from the point of view of human communication.
Now, please tell me something. So, since we are we actually coming to the end of the program, now we talked about development communication connected to agricultural communication. We also talked about development communication being intrinsically joined with the future of democracy in our country. Now, there are new things emerging. Obviously, there is a right to education given in under the Indian Constitution now to children. There is also midday meal which is being given in every school. There is also a system in which the right to information is a reality where people can ask questions about my money, my accounts. You know, so do you think that the villagers, particularly the women, can have a role in this, in intervention, in making sure that the democracy works, in making sure that the teacher comes to school through self-help groups, through organization or anything?
Well, I'm sure that women can play a very constructive role. When you talk about the role of communication in democracy, by definition, democracy means accountability. You know, if people are not accountable to the people who elect them, then there is a transparency in the manner in which development programs and projects are undertaken. So both for transparency and accountability, which is essential for any democratic development and any democratic participation. Since in any case we have discussed earlier that women is still, now they are in the rural areas, they form the majority for the reasons that we mentioned earlier, migration and so on and so forth. The midday meal, yes, they can. Certainly if they take care of that, perhaps because mothers are mothers and men are not as effective or as caring, I have to say, right, as women are. Therefore, that is likely to work.
My last question of today to you, sir, is there any success story? Obviously, you've seen the experiments in Nepal, in Bangladesh, in South Asia, in Africa, various other parts of the country, where you've actually seen from your own eyes or participated in a success story where the agricultural communication has actually ended up in some kind of empowerment or enrichment of life?
Well, I suppose my experience of Pantnagar Agriculture University and how that university has been able to provide regular information to the farming community around, you know, in the districts for which it had the responsibility.
Does it happen as a mela form or how?
It was actually Pantnagar Agriculture University was one of the pioneers in starting Kisan Melas, and thousands of farmers from all over India come to Pantnagar. Essentially, initially because the Pantnagar seed was known all over India, Tarai Seeds Corporation. And it also allowed them to come and see the research farms, research stations at the university. So that's one way of communication. The university also established agriculture extension units, and it was the first university also to broadcast its own radio programs, have its own magazines. Kisan Bharati and Indian Farmers Digest were two magazines that were published. Large number of publications, agriculture extension training. So there were a variety of means to share information, and you know, the farmers in Tarai area have become very well off.
So which means it has worked. So
it has,
we have actually today we have discussed agricultural communication with Dr. Abdul Wahid Khan, an internationally recognized educator, communicator and a development thinker. So thank you very much. What we've learned is that agricultural communication is definitely connected with development communication. It is also connected with empowerment, with accountability and transparency, and with the future of democracy. Thank you very much.
Thank you for having me in the studios.